Venise Ocampo, a hospitality management instructor. Welcome to my class.
A pleasant day to each and every one of you. Welcome to our class, Macro Perspective in Tourism and Hospitality. So for our last topic, this middle term in THM01, so our discussion will be about the impacts of tourism and hospitality. So as we all know, pag sinabi natin yung term na impacts, okay, so ibig sabihin it has two sides, whether it has a positive impact or negative impact sa tourism and hospitality industry. So let's begin discussing it. So for the impacts and effects of tourism and hospitality, we will be focusing on four segments. First one is the economic, social, cultural, and environmental impacts and effects of tourism and hospitality. So first is for the positive economic effects of tourism and hospitality. So first, meron siyang effects pagdating sa income, sa employment, balance of payment, and investments and development. So first is the income. So as we all know, tourism and hospitality industry is obviously generates income within a destination country. So we have to bear in mind that tourism and hospitality industry is one of the largest and fastest growing industry that we have here in the Philippines as well as in other countries. So of course, dahil nga po malaki ang tourism and hospitality industry, so it makes sense na isa tayo sa mga nag-generate ng malaking income sa ating bansa. So nations wanting to increase their income have used tourism and hospitality as a means for reasonably quick development. So part of the Department of Tourism is to make sure that tourism industry has this kind of socio-economic impact, okay, sa ating bansa. So isa siya sa mga pinagkukunan natin ng income, okay, isa siya sa pinagkukunan ng pera ng libu-libong mga tao, especially ng mga businesses, okay, para sila ay makapag-generate ng income. So tourism income in general comes from wages and salaries, interest, rent, and profits. So since tourism and hospitality is a labor-intensive industry, the greatest proportion of its income is derived from wages and salaries. So, syempre, dahil nga sinasabi natin that tourism and hospitality is a labor-intensive, so kumbaga, yung malaking porsyento ng income na na-earn natin is ginagamit natin para sa mga pampasweldo sa mga employees natin. Okay? So income is also generated from interest, rent, and profits on tourism and hospitality businesses. So of course, dahil itong mga establishments na to, they need to rent yung mga buildings na yan. They also need to pay the interest dun sa mga pinagkakautangan nila or doon sa mga na-acquire nila na loans. So income is also obtained from direct taxation or indirect taxation. So dito merong nabanggit na term about the VAT or yung VAT na tinatawag, which means value added tax. Okay, so kahit saan naman pag bumili tayo ng item, makikita natin na may VAT, okay, sa mga binibili nating item. So that kind of value added tax is an example of indirect taxation. So hindi na natin siya fina-file directly. So indirectly, nakikita na lang natin siya sa mga binibili natin ng mga items or mga ina-avail nating mga services. If I'm not mistaken, 12% ang ating value added tax dito sa Philippines. So the sum of all the income in a country is called the national income. Okay, so please take note of this. Okay, so yung pinagsama-samang income within the country, so ang tawag natin doon is national income. Another term here is the multipliers. So when we talk about multipliers, these are the means of estimating how much extra income is produced in an economy as a result of the initial spending or injection of cash. So from the word itself, multiplier, so magkano ba yung extra income na napoproduce natin galing doon sa mga initial na mga expenses natin or sa mga initial na nirelease natin na mga cash. So, the second one is the employment. So, as we all know, dahil tayo ay labor-intensive industry, so it makes sense again na marami tayong pwedeng i-offer na mga employment opportunities. Ibig sabihin, marami tayong chances to search for a specific job na magfi-fit sa atin in the future. So, tourism and hospitality generates employment faster for developing nations than for the developed ones. So, syempre ang isang bansa kapag unti-unti nagde-develop yan, most likely maraming mga tourism and hospitality establishments ang nag-o-open, so kailangan nila ng mga employees. That is why nag-i-start sila syempre sa recruitment process. So, you need to apply, pass your resume, and they will see to it if you are fit for the certain job. So, we have three types of employment. We have the direct, indirect, and induced employment. So, first is the direct employment. So, when we talk about direct employment, it is generated as the result of providing goods and services directly to tourists in hotels, restaurants, bars, and etc. Okay? So, ibig sabihin natin ng direct employment, so pwede na ang mismong hotel na, mismong restaurant na ang mag-hire sa inyo. Okay? So, in return, you need to provide your services, okay, sa mga nasabing establishment na to. Directly na nila kayong pwedeng i-hire. For the indirect employment, so it consists of those positions that are associated with other tourism-related activities but are used by both local resident and the tourists. Okay? So, dito naman sa indirect employment, so dito naman po nakapasok yung mga sinasabi natin na mga certain job positions na associated pa rin sa tourism activities. So, for example, yung mga tour wholesalers, mga food wholesalers, and even yung mga shop. Na usually, itong mga examples na to is nagagamit ng mga local resident at saka nung iba pang mga turista. So, the third one is the induced employment. So, it refers to people working in positions only peripherally related to tourism and hospitality but generated because of it. So, for example, alam naman natin na we cannot operate a hotel without constructing yung pinaka hotel establishment itself. So, example po niyan is mga construction workers, mga merchants, professionals such as doctors and accountants who service the employees working directly in tourism-related positions. So, ibig sabihin, etong mga induced employment na to, they are working for a certain position. Okay? Na related pa rin sa tourism and hospitality. So, for example, magtatayo tayo ng hotel. So, inside the hotel, dapat meron tayo mga resident doctors, mga resident nurse, na which is important kapag meron tayong mga accidents na nangyari inside the hotel. Okay, so for example, may mga serious medical conditions na nangyari sa mga employees natin na pwede nating agapan sa tulong ng mga doctors. And we also need accountants, 'di ba? Para sa mga pag-audit, pagdating sa mga finances natin sa hotel. So that is what you call induced employment. So those are the three types of employment. So next one is the balance of payment. So, balance of payment is an accounting flow of goods, services, and funds in and out of the country during a given period. So, most of countries, particularly those with good tourism and hospitality facilities but little industrial or agricultural export potential, appreciate the contribution that incoming tourists can make to their balance of payment accounts. So, ano ba tong sinasabi natin na balance of payment? Okay? So, most likely yung mga ibang countries, okay, na merong magandang pamamalakad pagdating sa tourism and hospitality. So, sila usually, no, yung masasabi natin na nakakapag-contribute ng malaking income as well. But other countries kasi, sila naman yung may little or less industrial or agricultural export potential. Pero kasi dito sa Pilipinas, parang sabi nga natin, nasa atin na lahat. Okay, nasa atin na lahat ng opportunities. It's just that hindi lang natin magamit ng tama yung mga resources. Like for example, we have famous destinations here. Okay? Ang gaganda ng mga tourist destinations natin. And even yung ating mga agricultural lands na nagagamit natin to export kay mga crops, mga goods to other countries as well. So, dito sa balance of payment, okay, so we can also maximize tourist receipts through the development of new attractions, promotions, subsidized exchange rates, and other measures. So, syempre, yung mga turista, they are willing to pay, no, for the services, especially kung first time nilang pumunta sa isang bansa. So, syempre, we can extend yung mga pwede nilang bilhin, pwede nilang mga avail na products and services if we are going to offer additional attractions pa, mga additional activities and services for them as well. So, syempre, ang balance of payment, ang isang bansa, of course, they have to be willing na magbayad ng iba't ibang mga utang, 'di ba? Kung meron silang utang sa iba't ibang bansa, meron silang utang sa mga banks, so they need to make sure to pay those balances as well. Para syempre, patuloy na mag-generate ng maayos yung ating industriya. Okay, so that is balance of payment. So next we have the investment and development. So of course, once an area has become economically successful, businessmen and government agencies may be influenced to invest in tourism and hospitality and other industries in that area. This is known by the economists as an accelerator concept. So, it makes sense again na syempre kapag ang isang bansa is well-developed, okay, economically stable ang isang bansa, so, ibig sabihin nun, maraming mga business opportunities ang pwedeng mag-exist. So, itong mga businesses na to, mga businessmen, yung iba't ibang mga government agencies, pwede silang mag-invest sa industriya natin. Okay? So, syempre, pag nag-invest sila, it will require them a lot of money, pero syempre, mababawi naman din nila yung kanilang investment. So, ang tawag daw doon is an accelerator concept. It means nag-accelerate, 'di ba? Kumbaga, tumataas yung chances for us to basically, 'di ba, magkaroon pa ng further development sa ating industry. So, how about the negative economic effects? So, yung mga na-mention natin kanina, like employment, balance of payment, income, and investment and development, those are the positive effects. So, how about the negative? So, we have here the inflation and land values, high leakages, seasonality, overdependence on tourism and hospitality. So, for the inflation and land values, so, syempre, alam naman natin na tumataas talaga ang bilihin. Tumataas ang mga prices ng mga goods and mga services na pwede nating i-avail. So, the inflationary effects of tourism and hospitality can arise in different ways. So, for example, yung mga turista natin, mga rich tourists, mga mayayaman, of course, they can afford to buy items at high prices. But what about those tourists na nasa middle section lang? Okay, like for example, sakto lang yung kanilang mga budget. So, how can they afford to buy these products and services kung kakaunti lang naman or sapat lang naman yung kinikita nila? So, kaya nga yung iba, they make sure na before going outside the country, bago sila mag-international travel, talagang nag-iipon muna sila. Kasi syempre, iba po yung presyo ng mga bilihin, iba yung presyo ng plane ticket, iba yung presyo ng accommodation, and yung mga food na kakainin natin sa ibang bansa compare here. Okay? Kasi for example, dito nga lang domestic travel. When we go to Boracay, kunyari, iba naman din yung presyo ng mga pagkain nila doon. Okay? Yung simple na mineral water, kung dito sa atin, it costs 15 to 20. Doon, baka it costs 50 pesos. Diba? Kasi syempre, it has something to do also with logistics, of course, yung pag-transfer ng mga goods from land to sea base, yung mga ganun, and other factors as well. So, retailers then realize that their profits can be greatly increased by catering to tourists, increase their prices on certain products, and provide more expensive goods and services Kaya lang kasi, there are times na parang ginugulangan na lang natin yung mga turista. 'Di ba? Makikita natin pag foreigner, sobrang mahal nung binabayad nila. Sobrang mahal nung presyo kapag foreigner yung bibilin. Ay, foreigner yung bibili rather. So, syempre, yung mga foreigner kasi normally hindi naman na sila tatawad sa presyo. Unlike us Filipinos na mahilig tayong tumawad. Okay, so for example, ang lengua de gato na naka-jar, kunyari, 250. So, tayo, tatawaran pa natin kung pwede bang 200 na lang. Okay? So, kaya ang ginagawa, nagiging strategy ng iba, kapag foreigner, mas mataas yung presyo nila. Pero, syempre, dapat sumusunod pa rin tayo sa tamang pricing strategy. Kasi ayaw naman natin, syempre, na ma-report tayo sa DTI or the Department of Trade and Industry. So, next is the high leakages. So, leakage occurs from a variety of sources. It occurs from the cost of goods and services that must be imported to satisfy the needs of tourists. Okay? So, another source daw ng leakage is the remittance of profit and wages to outside sources. So, yung mga remittances na yan na instead sa atin mapunta, okay, so pinapadala natin sa ibang bansa. Okay? So, for example, the cost of advertisement is a large expense that reduces the earnings of a destination area. So, instead of putting those budget sa paglago ng ating ekonomiya, okay, sa paglago din ng ating business, for example, nagagamit natin yun for the advertisement purposes. Kasi baka, kaya tayo nag-a-advertise, kaya tayo nagpo-promote or market, it's because hindi pa ganun kasikat yung lugar. Kaya baka hindi pa siya well-known sa mga turista. So, of course, part naman din yun ng ating budget. Kaya dapat iayos natin, iayos natin yung ating finances din. So, para hindi siya maging negative effect sa ating industriya. Next one is seasonality. So, as we all know, dahil nga po tayo ay nakadepende, ang mga tourist destinations, especially mga natural tourist destinations, they are all dependent sa nature. So, without nature, hindi naman sila mag-e-exist. Like, for example, yung mga mountains na yan na pwedeng mag-hike tayo, yung mga falls, okay? Like, for example, yung mga beaches na yan. So, isa sa mga negative effect nun sa industriya natin is yung tinatawag na seasonality. So, alam naman natin sa Philippines, we only have 2 seasons, 'di ba? Tag-araw, tag-ulan, 'di ba? Yung mga pag may pagbabagyo na nangyayari. So, ibig sabihin kapag rainy season na, so medyo nalilesen na. Okay, yung patronization natin pagdating sa mga tourist destinations such as beaches, 'di ba? Kasi syempre, sino ang magbi-beach kapag tag-ulan na or panahon na ng mga bagyo? Okay? So, ibig sabihin, kapag ganun yung nangyari, yung mga tourist regions na yan, they experience low return on investments. Okay? So, hindi nila nakukuha na mag-generate ng income kasi nga, wala na masyadong taong pumupunta. So, that is why, kahit na rainy day season na, yung mga hotels, mga restaurants, o yung mga ibang tourist destination, nag-generate sila ng marketing strategy. Okay? Na, ang gagawin nila, nag-o-offer sila ng mga promos, mga discounts like rainy days promo. Okay? Na for 1,999 makakapag-check-in ka na sa hotel with free breakfast, etc. Okay? So, the seasonality demand is reflected in hotel occupancy rates. So, makikita natin yun. Sobrang baba ng number of guests na mag-check-in for this day, for this month. Kasi nga po, nakadepende yon sa seasonality. Pero asahan ninyo, pag summer season, diba napakaraming mga turista ang willing na magpabook sa mga hotels na yan, sa mga tourist destination, kahit mahal. Okay? So, next is the overdependence on tourism and hospitality. So, we all know that tourism is highly susceptible to changes from within and outside the country. So, kumbaga sa sensitive, ang ating tourism industry is sensitive. Okay, why? Because, for example, there are certain typhoons, mga bagyo, earthquakes, diba, mga tsunami or mga natural disasters. So, rest assured na ang ating turismo is maapektuhan talaga. So, changes from within price and fashions, outside changes are global economic trend or political situation. So, the decrease in demand for destination results in underutilization of services, unemployment, and low or loss of income. So, dapat hindi tayo masyadong magdepend sa tourism attractions and destination. Kasi sometimes, overdependence might also be the result of parang overuse. Okay? Pag masyado na tayong nakadepende doon. So, dapat, nandun lang tayo sa balance. Okay? Kumbaga, balance lang yung pagdepende natin or balance lang yung paggamit natin sa dalawang industriya. So, how about the social impacts? So, we are done with the economic impacts of tourism and hospitality. So, sa social impacts naman, it refers to the changes in equality of life of residents of tourist destination. So, the objective of social tourism is to ensure that tourism is accessible to all people. So, in this case, we want na ang maging goal natin is that tourism industry is accessible for all types of people. So, whether you are rich, whether you are poor, or let's say you are in the middle of the social status, or what do I mean is social hierarchy, okay? Whether you have these abilities or you have this normal function naman ng katawan mo, so dapat accessible pa rin yung pagpunta sa iba't ibang lugar. That is why may mga importance tayong binibigay, di ba? May mga important treatment tayong binibigay sa mga persons with disabilities. So, dito we have classification of tourists and visitors. So, before we've mentioned two types of visitors, di ba? The tourist and the excursionist. So, other than that, we still have classifications. So, first is the explorer. Pag sinabi nating explorer, this type of visitor is interested in being an active participant or observer among the population. So, ikaw ba yung klase ng turista na you are more on sa observation? 'Di ba? Kapag may mga activities na ipapagawa, pag may mga activities na pwedeng joinan, ikaw ba ay isang active or ikaw ba ay kumbaga game na game sa mga ipapagawa during the tour or mga pwedeng gawin? So that is explorer. So for elite, this type of tourist is few in number. He can afford to pay well for unusual vacation. He is well-traveled and known as the jet setter. So when we talk about the term elite kasi, parang it suits for the rich people, mga mayayaman. So kahit mga unusual vacation yan, or let's say mga, like for example, you're going to Switzerland, you are going to visit the Aurora Borealis, or mga, di ba yung sa Norway, mga ganon. So very unusual yung mga vacation setting na yun. Okay, sobrang mahal din ang kailangan natin na i-produce na pera. So, si elite, kayang-kaya niya yun. Yung elite tourist. So, si offbeat naman, this tourist adopts well to simple accommodation and services provided for the occasional guest. So, si offbeat, madali lang po siyang maka-adapt. Okay, sa mga simple accommodation, mga services. So, si offbeat guest or si offbeat tourist, hindi siya masyadong maarte or let's say meticuloso pagdating sa mga accommodation na tutulugan or pag-i-stayan. So kahit halimbawa sa tent lang yan, okay, so camping style, so okay lang kay offbeat kahit hindi sa mga mamahaling hotel or sa simple transient lang. So that is offbeat. So next is the unusual tourist. So si unusual tourist naman, they love sub-exotic cultural sites. Okay, like for example, magka-camping sila sa gitna ng forest, or magka-camping sila sa peak ng mga mountains, kasi 'di ba may mga mountains na pwede kang mag-hike and then pwede kang mag-overnight stay doon using your tent. So that is unusual tourist. So next is incipient mass tourist. So mixture of both pleasure seeker and business traveler. So, ito naman yung mga businessman na usually hindi lang naman sila literally nagpupunta sa bansa na yun for business purposes. Pwede pa rin silang mag-enjoy. Okay, pwede pa rin silang gumawa ng mga iba't ibang activities after ng kanilang agenda doon sa bansa na yun, or let's say tapos na yung business meeting. So, pwede pa rin silang mag-avail, makapag-try ng iba't ibang activities. Kaya nga sinabi, mixture of both pleasure seeker and business traveler. So, those are the classification of tourist visitors. Ayan. So, in addition, we still have mass tourists. So, he comes from the middle class. He arrives in a destination with other tourists. So, maramihan naman sila. Parang group tour. Kaya na darating siya sa destination na meron pa siyang ibang kasama. Hindi lang siya mag-isa ang nag-travel. So, we also have the charter tourists. Charter tourists comes en masse with others of his kind, creating an extremely high amount of business, receiving a high degree of standardization in service and products. So, si charter tourist naman, ito yung mga VIPs. Okay, like for example, yung president ng Amerika pupunta sa atin. So, most likely, talaga namang i-assist siya with a high quality of service, kung ano man yung mga request niya. Okay, so kumbaga may touch of personalization or customization sa service na ibibigay sa kanya. Okay, and usually, kaya naman din sila nagpupunta sa isang bansa is meron silang particular agenda na kailangan gawin. So, next one is the positive social effects of tourism and hospitality. So, kung may negative, meron din namang positive na social effects. So, of course, it creates social change and multicultural understanding. It encourages adaptation to the realities of modern life and improvement of the host country's lifestyle, promotes the use of foreign language, improve health conditions, and disease control. So, ang positive effect naman ng social category of tourism and hospitality is that we are able to communicate, we are able to mingle with other tourists na iba't iba syempre ang kanilang mga nationality. Okay, may Amerikano, may Chinese, 'di ba? Merong mga Indonesian, okay? So, may mga Canadian, Australian, na in that case, we are having this kind of multicultural diversity as well. Okay? So, syempre, because of tourism and hospitality, nag-i-improve ang buhay, nag-i-improve ang lifestyle ng mga host people doon sa lugar. So, ibig sabihin, yung pinaka-community, okay, because of the generation of employment and income, gumaganda yung buhay nila paunti-unti. We are able to use different languages, 'di ba? Natututo tayong gumamit ng mga iba't ibang languages, hindi lang yung Tagalog, hindi lang English, okay? So, improve health conditions and disease control. So, of course, because of the pandemic, mas ini-strengthen natin yung pagpapatupad ng safety and health protocol as well. So, how about the negative effects of tourism and hospitality, or negative social effects? We have first, the changes in social code structure, behavior and roles, community problems, and negative demonstrative effects. So, syempre, ang nangyayari sa atin, kapag hindi talaga natin properly na manage ang tourism and hospitality, nagkakaroon tayo ng tinatawag na changes in social structure, behavior, and role. So, there are times na dahil nga iba't iba ang form ng employment or forms of employment, makikita natin na andun pa rin yung low status, okay, ng mga kapwa nating Pilipino na hindi pa nakakaangat sa society. Okay, kaya nga we want to help yung mga agricultural workers, diba, hanggat maaari, we want to help them, provide them the land that they need to, of course, para magtanim ng mga iba't ibang crops na makakatulong for them to generate income as well. So, another thing, yung migration of the population and breaking up of families. So, sometimes yung iba nating mga kapwa Pilipino, they decided na instead of working here, diba, magtatrabaho na lang sila sa ibang bansa. Okay, so ibig sabihin, yung knowledge nila, yung expertise, hindi nila dito nadadala sa bansa natin. So, doon nila dadala or ipe-perform sa ibang bansa. Okay? So, we also have community problems. So, isa sa mga problems dyan is about the prostitution. So, as we all know, prostitution, ito ang oldest profession. Sometimes, ginagamit nila ang tourism and hospitality for this kind of negative activity. Like for example, 'di ba? Yung ibang mga hotels, ginagamit nila para sa prostitution. Magpapasok ng mga babae, 'di ba? Tapos makikita mo may mga mayayaman na papasok din sa hotel for that kind of activity. So napakadami, no? Napakadaming mga pwedeng maging community problems. And even mga violation against women and children. Okay, so isa rin 'yun. And negative demonstrative effects. So, sa negative demonstrative effects kasi, dito natin nakikita na there might be changes in the consumption patterns in some tourist areas. So, hindi na natin nakokontrol. Like, for example, yung mga nakikita natin from the tourists, okay, mga behavior na na-adapt natin, which is hindi naman applicable sa bansa natin. So, how about the culture impacts of tourism and hospitality? So, we have the term acculturation is defined as those changes that occur in culture through borrowing from other culture. So, tayo kasing mga Filipino, 'di ba? Meron tayong mga kultura na na-adapt sa ibang bansa na nagagamit natin, okay, dito sa Philippines. So, we have to make sure lang na if we are going to borrow or let's say use yung kanilang mga kultura or gagawin natin, hindi pa rin natin makalimutan yung talagang culture ng pagka-Pilipino. We also have the cultural convergence is the tendency of the world cultures to become more alike. So, dahil nga we tend to borrow the culture of other countries, so dumarating tayo sa punto na may tendency na magkamukha-mukha. Diba? Like for example, because of our patronization, because of our being a fan of K-pop, mga K-drama, yan, mahilig sa mga Korean. So, unti-unti nagagaya na natin sila. Okay, even sa mga pagkain, 'di ba? Usong-uso na ngayon yung mga restaurants na nag-offer ng samyupsal, 'di ba? Yung mga grill na yan, grill restaurants na before wala naman dito sa Pilipinas. So, we also have the positive cultural effects of tourism and hospitality. Ayan, we have the intercultural communication. So, mobility is a prerequisite of tourism and hospitality. It's necessary for different social groups, nationalities, and cultures to meet and interact. So, because of communication, we're able to interact with other people kahit ano man yung kanilang nationality, ano man yung kanilang kultura. So, it enables us to interact with them. Especially, 'di ba, kung ikaw ang owner, halimbawa, isa kang salesperson sa mga establishment na 'yan. So, 'di ba, nakakausap natin yung mga foreigners, nakakausap natin yung iba't ibang mga tao. Okay, so we also have the renaissance of native culture. So as we all know, the term renaissance, it means awakening or rebirth. Okay? So may mga instances din na yung mga traditional art forms is nare-revive ng iba't ibang mga countries. Okay? So tourism and hospitality has stimulated the preservation of traditional art, including traditional songs and dances. Diba? That is why sa mga ibang bansa, sa mga hotels nila, they make sure na may mga cultural performance pa din. Diba? Sinasayaw pa rin nila yung mga traditional dances, kinakanta pa rin nila yung mga traditional songs. So, kasi syempre part yon ng tourism and hospitality na we have to make sure na yung mga kultura natin before na parang hindi na inaalala, kaya yung mga kultura natin before na unti-unti nang nabaon sa limot because of the new transition of the society or the generation. So, it's important for us to revive it. Okay? We have to revive yung ating culture because that culture reminds us of being a Filipino as well. Ayan. So, next one is we have the environmental impacts. So, we're done with the cultural impacts. So, syempre, isa sa mga positive effect nito or impact is the conservation. So, we have to bear in mind that conservation is very important. Okay? So, if we are not going to conserve and preserve yung ating mga tourist attractions, so ibig sabihin, hindi natin yan mapapakinabangan ng matagal. Hindi natin yan magagamit ng maayos. So, we also have to develop attractions, and through development, nape-preserve natin yung history ng lugar, yung historical significance, and nagkakaroon din ng mga benefits, okay, yung mga resident or yung mga tao within the community. So, we also have the negative effects. So, syempre, andyan yung environmental conflicts, geological conflicts, and resident conflicts. So, lahat ng yan, sa environment kasi, if we are not going to practice na, like, for example, yung proper waste segregation to separate the biodegradable from non-biodegradable, so, malaking impact na yung magagawa nun. Kaya malaking negative impact na yung magagawa if we are not going to segregate properly yung mga waste natin. Okay? So, syempre, hindi pa natin yan nakikita sa ngayon. Pero in the future, yung mga magiging anak ninyo, diba, yung magiging family ninyo, baka maranasan nila yung hagupit ng ating kapaligiran or ng ating Mother Earth. Okay? So, resident conflict naman kasi, it is caused by the people living in the area, no? Sila yung nagko-contribute ng kalat, sila yung nagko-contribute ng mga problems sa nature. Kaya nga sabi natin, 'di ba, yung overdependence is a negative impact. So if we depend too much without even taking care of our environment, so it will cause us, 'di ba, too much damage, and that will affect the future generations as well. Okay, so I think that's the end of our discussion. Please replay the lesson video if you missed some points in our discussion. So again, we have the positive and the negative impacts of tourism, starting from the cultural, impacts. We also have the economic impacts, the environmental impacts, and the social impacts as well. Okay, so thank you so much for listening and have a nice day.